Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me clearly. Can someone just confirm whether you can hear me or not? Chandi, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Chandi, thank you. Okay, so if there are any connection issues, just let me know. So I'm doing my lectures from my hostel, so there might be connection issues. If there are any connection issues, just let me know. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. We are going to start the second lesson of our lecture series of business process analysis. So the second lesson is lesson 2, process identification and process selection. Okay, so in the last week lecture, we learned about what is business process analysis and what is business process management, as well as we learned about the business process management life cycle. So can you remember what was the first step, or what is the first step in our business process management life cycle? Can you remember? Chamalki, can you remember? What was the first step in business process management? We discussed about the business process life cycle. So within the life cycle, we identified a few different steps. We didn't go into deep. We just went through the particular cycle. So in the cycle, what was the first step? Can anybody say? Priyanka, can you remember? What was the first step? Anyone, you can use the chat box if you know, or else you can use the voice option. Okay, so Chandi is telling design. Was it the design stage in the initial in the business process life cycle? Okay, so I will share the screen with regard to the last week lesson. Just give me a minute. Okay. Yeah, process identification. Define the scope. Tarindu is with regard to considering the business process analysis life cycle. So we are talking about business process management life cycle. So the first step in business process management life cycle is process identification. So based on the process identification, the output would be process architecture. And then we had to do process discovery, like a process analysis, process redesign, process implementation, process monitoring. Likewise, there are activities. So the first and foremost activity that we had to do is process identification. So today, what we are going to mainly focus is on process identification. Okay, so I hope everyone is clear what we are going to do today within the business process management life cycle. So moving on. So these are the 4 ILOs that we need to achieve today. So initially, you should be able to define what is business process identification and process selection. So basically, there are 2 keywords. So when we talk about process identification, we have to consider about process identification first, and then we have to talk about process selection. So you should be able to understand and define what is business process identification and process selection. And the next one is when you're identifying a process, there is a thing called a process checklist that you can use. So you have to identify a process using the process checklist. So you should be able to identify a new process using the process checklist. And next, after identifying a process through this process checklist, you have to evaluate that particular business process. So basically, you have to identify the baselines. So for that, we have to identify process performance measures. So we are going to talk about 4 process performance measures today. So using those things, you should be able to evaluate a business process. And the fourth one is you should be able to develop process objectives and targets. So after identifying a process and identifying process performance measures, you have to define process objectives, the things that you're going to achieve, and targets as well. And finally, you can utilize the process portfolio quadrant to select a process. So when you're selecting a process, there's a thing called a process portfolio quadrant. So you can use this particular tool to identify which processes that you're going to select. Okay, so these are the 5 ILOs that you're going to achieve at the end of today's lesson. I hope everyone is clear. So for the purpose of delivering the lecture, I have mainly divided the lecture into mainly four parts. Initially, we'll discuss about business process identification, and then we will discuss about process checklist and selection of business processes. And the third part is process performance measures. So basically, those are the KPIs. And finally, we'll talk about process portfolio before finishing off the lecture for today. Okay, so starting with business process identification, we'll start with a small activity. So in this activity, what we have to do is we have to identify what is business process identification. So for this one, you can go to the Padlet link that I have already shared in the Moodle. So go to Padlet. I will share the particular link in your chat box also. Go to that particular link and try to identify what is business process identification. So the question is, what is the business process identification? So try to answer this one. I will give you all about a couple of minutes to answer this. So everyone have to answer this one, okay? If you have any questions, you can ask for me. So until then, those who have not renamed yourself with the registration number plus your calling name, please rename yourself with the registration number and calling name. Okay, so when you're providing your answers, but this is a plus mark. And for the subject, give your name, okay? Don't give just names, just answers. You have to provide your, for the subject, you have to give your name. For those who have already put the answers, you also can edit and provide your name as well. Okay, so we have a couple of answers here. We look into Prabodha's answer first. Systematically defining and documenting the organization's current processes. This includes identifying the inputs, output, activity, stakeholders of each process. So if you consider Nilochini's answer, business process identification is the initial step in understanding and cataloging all the activities and tasks that contribute to organizational goals. According to Rashi Prabha, business process analysis is examination of how a business operates, aiming to understand its processes, workflow systems in order to identify areas of improvement, efficiency gains, and cost savings. And Tarindu is mentioning it's all about defining the available business process of an organization and establish criteria to identify the process that needs further improvement. Okay, so I think everyone's answers have the essence of what is meant by process identification. So I will show you all what is the definition that I have given from the reference reading books. So the process identification refers to those management activities that aim to systematically define the set of business processes of an organization. So as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about process identification, first and foremost, we have to identify what is a business process within an organization. Then you have to identify. So after the identification, we have to establish clear criteria for selecting specific processes for improvement. So basically, after identifying the processes within the organization, you have to identify all the processes within the organization. After identifying that, you have to have a particular criteria to select a specific process or processes for business process management or for improvement. Okay, so when you consider about business process identification, the definition explains first and foremost, we have to identify the set of business processes of an organization. And then you have to, it mentions, you should have a clear criteria to select specific processes for improvement. So those are the two things that is explained in business process identification explanation. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have gone through the business process management life cycle, the output of business process identification or process identification would be process architecture. So we will learn about process architecture in the next week lecture. So basically it represents the processes and their interrelations between one another. So we'll learn about process architecture in the next week lecture. For now, just have an understanding about what is business process identification. So the next activity that you have to do is you have to identify why business process identification is required. So for this one, you can use the chat box. No need to go to Padlet. So try to identify why we need business process identification. So when you are considering business process management, the first step is business process identification. So I'm asking why do we need to do business process identification? So you all can use the chat box for this one. When you're sending answers, send it to everyone so everyone can see the answers. Don't send it to me directly. Okay, so I will give you all about a couple of minutes to do this activity. Abhiman, are you clear about the things that you have to do now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I will give you all about a couple of minutes to do this one. So please try this question now. Okay, so I think we have some answers in the chat box. I will go one by one. So according to Tarindo, to allocate limited resources to different processes and to identify the process that required improvements. Correct. Yeah, organizations, Hinsa organization can improve efficiency, improve quality, reduce cost. Yes. With many understanding operations, supporting decision making, optimizing workflows, and identifying inefficiencies. Gauri to make a smooth process. And Sanjana organization can visualize the activities in the process from beginning to end. Tatsarani make sure that business processes are aligned with the organization strategic objectives. Yes, Chandi is mentioning many things. Business process identification is required to understand operations, improve efficiency, ensure consistency, enable better management, optimization of processes, propose the enhance efficiency and effectiveness, and help to meet the organization goals to manually stating identifying what are the most important tasks to achieve organization goals. I think everyone's answers are correct. So I will let you from another perspective. I think Tarin touched this part. So when you consider about business process management, it is not it's actually an investment within an organization. Oh, you have to incur a particular resources. Oh, you have mainly financial resources. You have to have financial resources when you are doing business process activities. So that's why we say BPM is not free. Like any other investments in BPM have to pay off. So basically, if you are selecting a particular process for improvement, that particular improvement should have a return on investment. So basically, it should have a payoff. So that's why we say we have to properly identify processes within the organization, and there should be a selection criteria to select particular processes for improvement. Because investments in BPM are not free. We have to incur a particular time, we have to incur financial resources. Likewise, all of those particular incurred resources or incurred investments should have a payoff. So that's why we say it's very important. Okay, so it is vital to identify the relevant subset of processes. Basically, when you consider about organization, there are many processes within the organization. Some could be core processes, some could be supporting processes, and some would be just mandatory processes that we have to conduct. So likewise, there are different subset of processes. So we have to identify, we have to focus and provide attention to the relevant subset of processes. So that's why process identification is important. Okay, so basically, when we identify the subset of processes, some of these processes have strategic importance for the organization. For example, if we consider a manufacturing organization, so their main subset of processes would be manufacturing operations. So, for example, if it is a garment manufacturing, the garment manufacturing process would be the most vital process that have a strategic importance, and it has an influence towards the organization's survival as well. Okay, so it is important to conduct process identification to focus on processes that creates value of strategic relevance to the organization. So basically, when you're identifying processes and when you're selecting a particular process, those processes should be able to create value for the strategic relevance. So when you consider about organization, there are strategic goals, strategic missions, likewise, those are things. So basically, those processes that you have identified should have a strategic relevance, and it should be able to create value for the organization. And the next one is should have substantial problems. For example, if you are going to identify a process that is like near perfect and you are going to improve it further, the payoff would not be very much. If you are selecting a process that does not have much problems. In other terms, you can say a healthy process. If you are going to select a healthy process for improvement, the improvement payoff or the return on investment would not be much higher. So because of that, we have to identify processes which have substantial problems, or both. Both means have a create value for strategic relevance as well as a substantial problem. One of them or both of them should be evident when you are identifying a process. Okay, is everyone clear up to this level? Dulanjan, are you clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what about Nimanta? Are you clear, Nimanta?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll do a small Mentimeter activity. So what you have to do is I will copy this link to your chat box. You can straight away go to that particular through that link, or you have to go to menti.com and you have to type the particular voting code that I am going to share in another few minutes. Just give me a minute until I copy the link. Okay, so in the chat box, I have copied the link. So you can go to that link, or else what you have to do is you have to go to menti.com and type this particular voting code. Okay, so the question is process identification an ongoing task or a one-time activity? So do we have to do process identification again and again, or is it one time, or is it an ongoing task? So everyone has to answer about, there are about 34 students here. So try to answer this one quickly, everyone. So you can use either the link that I have shared in the chat box, or else you can go to menti.com. You can go to menti.com and you can type this particular code. And then you have to select either an ongoing task or a one-time activity. Okay, so as we can see, almost everyone is mentioning that it's an ongoing task. So when you consider about process identification, it's an ongoing task. It does not end. So after identification and after improvement, you have to again identify process, because from time to time, these changes. For example, when you consider in an organization, we can identify the organizations are playing in a like a very dynamic environment. So subject to, basically when you consider about processes also, processes as well as processes within the organizations are subject to dynamics of time and change. So from time to time it changes. So sometimes, for example, if you consider it's there could be a healthy process now, but in couple of years the processes might not be healthy because they are moving away from standards, and new technology is there. Likewise, because of those reasons, sometimes our processes have to be changed. So that's why we say process identification is an ongoing task, because processes that are within the organization is subject to dynamics of time and change. So because of that, it's an ongoing task. So as we mentioned earlier, specific processes may be problematic at one point. So, but once issues have been identified and resolved, it is time to shift the focus to other processes. So as I mentioned earlier, once we identify a process and when we select the particular process for improvement, so after improving that particular process, we have to find another process that we need to improve. Through the business process management initiatives, we have to identify another process that we need to improve that may have effect towards our organization. Okay, so like that's why we say this process identification is an ongoing task. For example, read this one out first. So after that, I will also explain this particular example. So read this particular example. Okay, so in this example, it explains this particular process identification is an ongoing process. So in this example, it considers about the insurance company, and initially there was a customer dissatisfaction with regard to claims handling process. So once this process has been improved and customer satisfaction is again with the desired range, they have to move on to another project or another process that needs to be improved. The emphasis might move on to its risk assessment processes, which are important for the long-term viability and competitiveness of the company. So that's why we say process identification is an ongoing task. It's not a one-time activity. So once you identify a particular process for improvement, so after improving that particular process, you have to move on to another process. Okay, so that's why we say it's an ongoing task. So moving on, before moving on to the process checklist and process selection, can you all mention whether you are clear or not? Can you all just send me a message through the chat box? Ayomi, are you clear, Ayomi?
Yes, sir.
Rashid, are you clear about the things that we covered today up to now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what about Dilki?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if you have any questions, you can use the chat box, or you can use the voice option and ask any question from me. Okay, so we'll move on to the second part now. So the second part is process checklist and process selection. Okay, so what is a process checklist? So as an organization, within organization, we have management teams, we might have process analysts and process owners. So process owners are the people who own the particular process. It could be a particular supervisor, it could be a particular manager like that. Okay, so these people should answer the following two questions with the help of a process checklist. Okay, so we use a process checklist to answer these two questions. So one is, what processes are executed in the organization? So basically, as an organization, they should have an understanding about what are the processes that are within their organization. So basically, it is a map of its processes. So basically, they should have understanding about all the processes within the organization. So we can use this process checklist to map our processes. Map means to identify what are the types of processes that are within our organization. And the next one is, which ones should be organization focused on? Okay, so which processes should the organization focus on? So basically, it will develop a criteria for determining which processes have the highest priority. For these two purposes, we can use the process checklist. So to identify the elements within a process checklist, we will do a small individual activity. You just have to read this one out only. It will take about no need to take 10 to 15 minutes. You can take about 10 minutes maximum to read this one out. It's only a couple of as I can remember, it was only couple of pages, only 2 pages. So you have to read this one out. It's already uploaded to your Moodle. You can go to Moodle, or else I can send it to the chat box also. So those who can access Moodle now itself, you can go to Moodle, and there is a thing called individual activity. So I will show that one. You can download from there itself. So under lesson 2, I have uploaded individual activity process checklist. You have to download this one. So once you download, you will have a PDF like this. Just give me a minute. Okay, so Dilki, can you see my PDF that I have opened? Sapsarani, can you see my screen? The PDF document.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in the PDF document, you only have 2 pages. What you have to do is you have to read from this the ash colored part, process checklist.
Yes, sir.
So there are a few criterias. The first criteria is it a process at all? So can the process be controlled? Is the process important enough to manage? So those are the checklists. Is the scope of the process not too big? Is the scope of the process not too small? So you have to read those parts, only the things that are in the ash color area. So can everyone do this one? So I will send the particular PDF through chat box also. Those who have access to Moodle, they can download it from Moodle as well. So I have sent the particular document through the chat box also. You can download it from there, or else you can use the Moodle itself. Or else you can read from the screen itself. I have already shared it. So what you have to do is you have to read this one and get an understanding. So after that, I will explain each and everything that is included here. Shashini, are you clear about what you have to do? Karindu, are you
Yes,
clear?
sir.
Okay, Shashini. Tarindu, are you clear, Tarindu?
Yes.
Okay. So I will give you about 10 minutes. It's now 12:41. At around 12:51, we will discuss this particular checklist. So until then, you can read the particular article, not the article, except from the reference reading book. It's only a couple of pages. You only need to read the particular things that are in the background, where the background is ash color. Okay, so I think the time is more than enough to read this one. Prabodha, were you able to read this one out? Prabodha? Prabodha, can you hear me, Prabodha?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so did you read this one out?
Yes.
Okay, so can you just explain based on your understanding? The first one, is it a process at all? What does that mean? No answer for that one. Okay. So what about Imesha? Imesha, what does this, is it a process at all means? Okay, so I will explain one by one. So the first one is in the checklist, you should have to identify whether it's a process at all. So sometimes within organization, if you don't have a good understanding about what are processes and if you cannot like differentiate processes from other things, you are unable to identify a particular process. So for example, you have to identify what constitutes as a business process. Usually, like departments does not constitute as a process. Departments or any job roles does not constitute as any process. So within departments, you can identify functions or processes. So usually a process consists of a verb plus a noun. For example, we can identify in the reference reading book, which has given approval of leave request. So that's a particular process. So it has a verb plus a noun. So that's how you identify whether it's a process or it's not a process. And the second one is, can the process be controlled? Can anybody explain what is that means? Kavindi, would you be able to explain? Kavindi, are you there, Kavindi? Chamal, are you there? Sanjana, are you there, Sanjana? Okay, I will explain this by one myself again then. So basically, can the process be controlled? For example, we have learned about within organization, we can identify operations as well as projects. For example, if we consider projects, these are not repetitive activities, and then we don't have the same prior knowledge. So because of that, there might be variations likewise. But when we consider about process operations, those are repetitive activities that is done again and again. So we have standard and we know how to do it. So because of that, we can control those particular things. So we have to identify, can the process be controlled? For example, a project we cannot control, but when you consider about processes, we can control it. And the next one is the process important enough to manage? So within an organization, there might be various processes. So we have to identify whether the process is important enough. Is it strategically important? Is the customer is willing to pay? So likewise, we have to identify those things. So the customer should be willing to pay for its outcome. So within the process, there would be a particular outcome. If the customer is willing to pay, that particular process is important. Or else there might be legal or mandatory requirements. For example, following health and safety guidelines. So there might be processes related to health and safety guidelines. So following that, the customers are not willing to pay for that, but it is required by legal or mandatory requirements by the organization. Okay, so moving on. So the next one is the scope of the process not too big? So when you identify in the process, the scope of that particular process should not be too big. So you have to identify the relevant processes or relevant process steps within the particular process. For example, if we consider this one, floor cleaning does not come as a process related to garment manufacturing. So basically, if you are focusing on garment manufacturing process, the floor cleaning process does not identify as a related process to garment manufacturing, but it could be a part of another process, the cleaning process, but it is not related to garment manufacturing. So you have to identify the scope of the process properly. So, okay. And the next one is the scope of the process not too small? So when you identify processes, there might be very large processes and medium or average size processes and very small processes like micro business processes. So these processes are not worth managing as process at all because it does not have much process steps as well as it does not include much process actors. So we discussed about who are actors within a process in the last week lecture. So to be a business process, there should be at least 3 different actors, excluding the customer. So without the customer, there should be at least 3 actors within a process to consider it as a process that we need to manage. Okay, so those are the things that should be included in the process. So through going through these process checklist, we can identify which constitutes as processes that we can consider for the next step. Next step is process selection. So through this process checklist, we can identify which processes can we can we bring forward or take into the next stage of process selection. Is everyone clear with regard to the process checklist? Is everyone clear? Bhagya, are you clear, Bhagya?
Yes, sir.
Ahimsa, are you clear?
Yes, sir.
Tishan, are you clear, Tishan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so moving on to the next step. So the next step is after identifying a process, you have to select a particular process. So what is process selection? So the aim of process selection is to define a criteria for assessing the performance of the identified business processes. So through the process checklist, we identify the business processes, and through process selection, what we have to do is we have to define a criteria to assess the performance of the processes. Okay, so basically these business processes differ from imports and maturity. So from process to process, it is different. So when you're identifying this process selection, we can identify this criteria for selecting a particular process. The first one is whether it has a strategic importance. Okay, so the criterion is concerned with assessing the strategic relevance of each process and finding out which process have the greatest impact on the strategic goals of an organization. So there, as I mentioned earlier, in an organization, there could be core processes as well as supporting processes. So most of the time, core processes has a strategic importance. So the achieving the outcomes or completing the particular process in successful manner has an impact towards the achieving strategic goals. Like guys, we have to identify whether these processes has a strategic importance. And the second one is health of these processes. So basically, we are selecting these processes to improve them. So through it, after selecting these processes, we have to run the particular process through the BPM or business process management life cycle. So our ultimate target is to improve these processes. So we have to identify what is the health of this particular process. The question here is to determine which processes are in the deepest trouble. So health means whether this particular is running according to plan or it has variation or it has room for improvement. Okay, so if it is not running based on our standards or it has many difficulties in doing that particular activity, it is in deepest trouble. It does not have a good health. Okay. So if you solve these particular one, it may have a effect towards the profit through the BPM initiatives. That is health. And the next one is feasibility. Okay, so when you are selecting a process, the process that is going to be selected should be feasible. Feasible means reasonable to achieve benefits. So when you are achieving particular processes, the selected processes should be improved. So the improvement should be feasible. So there might be obstacles to achieving results, likewise culture within the organization, different politics within the organization. Likewise, there are many issues. So considering all those issues, we have to identify whether the particular improvement is possible or improvement is feasible for that particular process. So this is the process selection criteria. So I just want to know whether everyone is clear about these three or not. So can you all just send me a message to the chat box whether you're clear or not? Okay. So moving on to the next part, as everyone is clear, process performance measures. So up to now, we have identified the process checklist in identification process. And then to select a particular process, we have identified a particular criteria. Now we are going to discuss about process performance measure. So after selecting a particular process, we have to identify the baselines. So to improve, you should know where you stand. So through using process performance measures, you can identify where you stand now. So as I mentioned earlier, for many VPM related management activities, we need a precise measurement of the health of business processes. So basically to identify the health or to identify the baseline that we need to improve, we have to use process performance measures. Okay, so basically when you are identifying process performance measures, it's a quantitative way of identifying. Quantitative means you have to identify a quantity determined to a given process, assuming that the data to calculate this performance measure is available. So data should also be available to calculate this particular quantity. Okay, so basically there is a key performance indicators, KPIs. So you're going to identify what is your baseline, and then you are going to set a performance target or set a performance objective based on these targets. So basically in a process, what you have to do is you have to improve these particular KPIs. Okay, so one is time, cost, quality, and flexibility. So those are the 4 process performance measures or dimensions that we can identify in a particular process. So after selecting a process for improvement, you have to identify the process performance measures in each and every process that you are going to improve. So basically these are acted as the baseline of business process performance. Okay, so moving on. So we'll talk one by one. So basically when you consider about time in operation, what time would be what is the time that we have to consider? Can anybody say? Madara, do you have any idea? What time do we consider in a process? Yes, Madara, can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you know what is the time that we are considering here? No idea. Okay, I think your connection is not good. What about Devmini? Do you have any idea? Devmini, do you have any idea about what time are we talking about here? Himanta, can you hear me clearly? Can just anybody confirm whether you all can hear me clearly or not? Is there a connection issue with me? Chandi, can you hear me clearly or not, Chandi?
Yes, sir.
You can hear me clearly, no?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so can you answer for this one? What time is that we are considering here, Chandi? So basically in operations, what time do we mainly consider? Okay, so I'll let you all know. So basically when you consider about an operation or a process, so basically we consider about the process cycle time. It's also called the throughput time. So basically the time that is taken from start to end is known as the cycle time. So basically when you consider about process performance measures, you have to identify what is the cycle time of your process that you have selected. So basically our idea would be to reduce the cycle time or reduce the variation in the cycle time. For example, if you are going to, in a manufacturing process, if you are going to manufacture like 10 garments, for the 10 garments, the variation should be minimum. For example, for one garment, it takes 1 minute, and for another garment, it takes about 5 or 6 minutes. So likewise, if there are variations of cycle times, we have to minimize those variations. And also, we have to ultimately reduce the cycle times. Okay. So when you consider about the cycle times, we have to identify two components of this particular cycle time. I think you already know about these things because we have learned about these things even in the first year lectures. So within the cycle time, we have a thing called the processing time, the time, the resources that is actually handled or actually processed, and the waiting time. Those are the two components of cycle time. If we reduce the waiting time and the processing time as much as possible, we can reduce ultimately we can reduce the cycle time as well as the variations in cycle time. Okay, so that is for time. So the next one is the cost. So in here, we are not going to focus on like increasing the turnover or yield or revenue in business process management. We are when we talk about cost and like financial aspects, but we are going to focus on reducing these costs. So by reducing, we can have a higher margin and then we can include the revenue, yield, or turnover. So process design, redesign. We have to redesign our processes in a way that we can reduce the particular cost. So in a cost, we have like two components. One is the fixed cost and the variable cost. So when you consider about under variable cost, so you know what is fixed cost? Fixed cost is the cost that we have to incur like at the initial stages. So it does not changes with the output that you make. So basically variable cost changes with the number of units or number of services that we provide. Those are variable costs. So basically under variable cost, we can identify operational cost. So basically this operational cost has a high influence towards the productivity. It's directly related to the outputs of a business process. So operational cost is very has influence towards the output of business processes. So if we reduce the operational cost through redesigning a particular process, we can ultimately reduce the cost related to the particular process. So when you consider about operational cost, it mainly focuses one major component under operational cost is labor cost. Particular labor cost when you are redesigning. So you have to identify ways how to reduce the labor cost, how to optimally use the particular resources that we already have, the labor resources. So likewise, those things. So the next one is quality. So basically, when you consider quality, we can identify from two angles. So one angle is from the client side. Client side means the customer of the particular process. It is known as the external quality. And from the process participants' perspective. So process participant means people who are actually involved in the particular process. So when you consider about external quality, so basically we identify external quality from the degree to which the client is satisfied with either the product or the process that we provide. So sometimes it might be like a tangible product, it might be an intangible product. So intangible product, the customers have to be participating in the process. Okay, so if we consider like satisfactions, we can identify two satisfactions based on the product or the service. For example, if it is a product, it is product satisfaction. So product satisfaction means the ability of the product to meet the customer specifications or not. So basically, after identifying the quality standards, we have to improve the quality standards. So the next one is process satisfaction. So based on the process, like how the process is executed. process satisfaction is concerned with that. So basically, we can identify like specific measures under process satisfaction called churn rate and net promoter score. So churn rate means like the degree to which the customer finishes the particular activity after participating. For example, consider like you're going to participate, consider this lecture. For example, at the start, there were about it's still 35. There were about 35 participants. So at the end of like when I finish the lecture, if I only have like 28 people, my churn rate is 28. Even though 35 has been participated, only 28 has completed the lecture as a whole. And the next one is net promoter score. Net promoter score means how much of your customers are going to promote you. Promote means like refer your particular service to other people. So likewise, you have to consider about those aspects as well when you're improving quality aspect. So basically, you have to identify what is the quality specification, what is the quality standard that you are currently in, and based on that, you have to improve it further when you are doing process improvement. Okay, so internal quality is considered from the process participants' viewpoint. Okay, so when you consider about process internal quality concerns, we have to identify control of the work performed. So basically, the particular process participant should have a control over the particular process. There should not be any variations. So the level of variations experience. So if they are experience high level of variations from one, like if a particular product is passing through that process, if these particular products have high variations in the particular process that they are currently in, we have to reduce that particular variation. So we can use different techniques like lean management, Six Sigma. So mainly Six Sigma focuses on reducing the variations. So likewise, we can use those methods, and whether working within the context of the business process is felt as challenging. So likewise, we have to consider about those aspects when we consider about internal quality. And finally, we have to consider about the flexibility. So flexibility means ability to react changes. So basically, in smooth conditions, we don't have to like react to changes, but in the actual world, even in the actual organizations, there are internal environment factors as well as external environment factors that you may have to react to changes. For example, if you consider during the COVID era, the manufacturing organization have to face like shortage of raw materials and shortages of orders. So likewise, under such situation, you should have flexibility to move from one product to another product likewise. For example, the ability of a process as a whole to handle various cases and changing workloads. In certain times, we might have more than work that we can handle, and sometimes we don't have work. So likewise, we have to identify the wishes of the market and business partners changes. So because of that, we should have a higher responsiveness in our processes. So you have to identify how flexible is your process now, and you have to improve that flexibility. So basically, you have to improve it. So there are two types of flexibilities that we can identify. So the first one is runtime flexibility and build time flexibility. So the runtime flexibility means opportunities to handle changes and variation while executing a specific business process. So while you are running a business process, if there are any changes or variations, how you can handle it, whether you are able to handle those changes without any like a major variations or major negative factors. And the build time flexibility means when you are redesigning the process, when you are redesigning the particular process, you have to make the particular process flexible through the business process structure itself, through the architecture itself. Okay, so those are the 4 process performance measures. Is everyone clear about those 4 process performance measures? Sajia, are you clear, Sajia?
Yes, sir.
Nilojini, are you clear, Nilojini?
Yes, sir.
What about Kavinda, are you clear?
Yes, sir.
Kavinda, no? Okay. Netmi, are you clear, Netmi? Okay, so if everyone is clear, we will move on to the next one. So up to now, we have identified processes through using the process checklist. So after identifying those processes, we have to select processes for improvement. So now we have improved, and then we have to identified their baselines. So after identifying the baselines through the KPIs or process performance measures, we have to set performance objectives and targets. So we will identify what is process performance objectives and targets. Okay, so read this particular mini case study. So after that, through this using this particular case study, I will explain what is performance objectives and targets. I will give you about a couple of minutes to read this one out. Okay, so in this example, it mainly focuses on a restaurant. So I will read this one. A restaurant has recently lost many customers due to poor customer service. So basically, their health of their process is very low because customers are losing because of poor customer service. The management team has decided to address this issue first of all by focusing on the delivery of meals. So they have identified this particular process. They have selected this particular process as a process that has strategic importance, and it is the delivery of meals. Okay, so the team gathered data by asking customers. So they are identifying the basically process performance measures or the baselines of the KPIs. Okay, so customers about how quickly they like to receive their meals and what they consider as an acceptable wait. So they identify what is their acceptable wait or what is their like a cycle time or throughput time. So the data suggested that half of the customers would prefer their meals to be served within 15 minutes or less. Okay, so half of the people said they eat their particular meal once they order within 15 minutes or less. And also customers agreed to a wait time of 30 minutes or more is unacceptable. So basically the highest level of accepted level of waiting time is 30 minutes or less. Okay, so this is regarding the particular case study. So based on this, I will explain how to set performance objectives to an organization. So after deriving data about the process performance measures, so basically we have identified our current standards, and now we have identified what is the acceptable level. Now we have to set process objectives need to be set in place. So when you are setting process objectives, there are like possible methods. So these ABC might be like we can consider these as steps. So the first one is you should be able to formulate performance objectives of the process at a high level. Sanjana, can you hear me, Sanjana? Is there a connection issue with me?
No, sir, no, okay.
No, okay, no, okay. So basically, the first step is you should be able to set performance objectives as process at a high level in the form of a desirable state that the process should ideally reach. So ideally, so after talking with the customers, everyone agreed that our services should be less than 30 minutes. So this is the highest level that the customers are willing to accept. And if we can provide our service before 30 minutes or less, the customers would be happy. So this is the highest level. Then what you have to do is you have to identify different parameters or different dimensions. For each performance objective, identify relevant performance dimensions and aggregation functions. Define one or performance measurements for the objective in question. So basically, we have identified the time as well as the percentage of customers that we need to serve within 30 minutes. For example, if we have 100 customers, how many of those 100 customers should we provide service within the 30 minutes? So that's the second step. And finally, we have to define a more refined objective. So out of using part A and part B, we have to define a more refined objective based on the performance measures that we have identified. So we can develop something like this. So this is our performance objective. So our ST could be like, what is ST? ST is here, so service time. ST could be the service time. Service time 30 is less than or equal. It should be like the service time should be 99%. 99% means 99% of the customers should have a waiting time of less than or equal 30. So that is what this means. So they have an error margin of 1% here. So when they are setting up this performance objective, they have identified 1% error would be there, but 99% of the time we should be able to provide our service to the customers with a waiting time of less than 30 minutes, less than or equal or less than 30 minutes. So that is how we define a more refined objective. Okay, so is everyone clear? So once you have a time frame, for example, this is a process performance objective. So our objective is to cater 99% of our customers within a service time of 30 minutes or less. So that's our performance objective. So to turn this particular objective into a target, we have to attach a time frame. For example, within 1 month periods of time, we are going to achieve this particular objective. So then it becomes a performance target. A performance objective with a time frame associated to it is usually called a performance target. Okay, is everyone clear up to this point? Praveen, are you clear, Praveen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Subodha, are you clear?
Yes.
Devmini, are you clear, Devmini? Abhiman, are you clear, Abhiman? Tarindu, are you clear, Tarindu?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now we are going to talk about the last part of our today's lesson. In here, what we are going to discuss is about the process portfolio. Okay, so process portfolio means we'll discuss what is the process portfolio. So basically, process portfolio is used within the selection process. Okay, so this is not done after setting performance objectives. So this is process portfolio is included in the process selection stage. So when we discuss about process portfolio, it identifies all the set of processes that we have identified. So basically, in the process identification stage, we have to identify all the processes within the organization. And in the selection, we have to identify which has the higher strategic importance, what is the health of these particular processes, and what is the flexibility, likewise. Okay, so process selection builds on three criteria of import. Three criteria. One is importance, health and feasibility. So basically for imports, we get a numeric value. For health also, we are going to get a numeric value. For feasibility also, we are going to numeric value. So based on these particular three things, we are going to plot the particular processes that we have identified in a quadrant which has 4 quadrants. Okay, so I will let you know what quadrant that we have to select. Basically, most of the time we have to select the particular processes in the left upper quadrant. Most of the time, not always. Okay, we have to identify. Most of the time, we are going to select particular processes in the left quadrant. I will show a particular process portfolio. So this is an example of a process portfolio of a financial institution. So these are the processes within these processes that they have identified in a financial institution: loan controlling, loan decisions, handling payments, loan market evaluation, contract preparation, rating, loan applications, loan planning. So as I mentioned, we in a process we have to consider about the importance, health of the particular process, and the feasibility. So just go through this particular process portfolio and get an understanding. After that, I will explain. Okay, so in this process portfolio, so as I mentioned earlier, we are going to consider the importance, the strategic imports, high and low, and we are going to consider health, whether our particular process is in good health or poor health, and the feasibility. So if it is black color, the feasibility is very low. We cannot the feasibility of using this particular process for improvement is very low, and medium and high. Okay, so based on this one, as I mentioned earlier, our selection focus should be on this particular quadrant, left uppermost quadrant. So this is the selection focus. So based on these particular things, uh, what process should we select? Is it loan controlling, loan decision, handling payments, loan market evaluation, or contract preparation? What process should we select? Can you all send me a message through chat box? So look at this one. You have to consider the importance factor, health factor, as well as the feasibility factor, and then identify what process should we choose, what process should we select for business process management or process improvement. Please send the answer through the chat box. So no answers up to yet, up to this level 8. Are you clear about what is the question? Chamodi, are you clear about the question that I asked? Teshan, are you clear about the question that I asked? Nilojini, are you clear? Just tell me whether you are clear or not. If you are not clear, I can explain it again. Okay. Okay. So I will explain the question again. Dhananji, were you clear, Dhananji, about the question? Nimanta, were you clear about the question? Harindu, were you clear? Okay, so I think Tarindu is the only one. Okay, Chandi, I will explain the question again. So basically what I'm asking is this process portfolio has to be developed after like identifying the processes. So basically we can use this particular process portfolio for the purpose of selecting a process. So we defined in process selection, there are three criteria that we have to consider. One is the importance of the particular process, and the other one is the health of the particular process, and the feasibility of implementing. So considering these three factors and this particular process portfolio, we had to, most of the time, we had to select a particular process from this particular region. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 processes. So what processes should we select? I'm asking what process should we select? Is it loan controlling, loan decision, handling payments, or loan market evaluation, or contract preparation? So what particular process should we select for process improvement? So you can send the answers to the chat box. Okay, so many of you are telling contract preparation. Many of you means almost apart from Tarindu, all others are telling contract preparation. Okay, so I will ask Tarindu, why did you select loan controlling?
If it is about the loan controlling and contract preparation, the strategic importance and the feasibility are same to
Yes.
but when we consider about the health, the loan controlling somewhat more than the contract preparation. I thought first we need to treat to the activity has less health. That's
Okay, thank you, Taranji, for your answer. It was a comprehensive answer. I will explain what is the correct answer. Okay. Ayomi, can you explain why you selected contract preparation?
Contract preparation is health than loan controlling.
So it has a good health. So it means,
Yes.
so why did you select? So usually when you are selecting, as Tarandu mentioned, we have to select the processes which have the highest importance. Health should be very less and feasibility should be also high. So feasibility is the same, importance is also the same, but health is somewhat okay in contract preparation. Do you think it is justified, Ayomi? Selecting contract preparation over loan controlling?
Yes.
Yes? Then you have to justify your answer. Tarindu justified his answer properly. Now you have to justify your answer.
Contract preparation and loan controlling has same importance
Yes,
and feasibility also same.
same.
Uh, but health is more than loan controlling.
So health, do you know what is health? Health means the processes health. For example, consider in a hospital. So if you have a good health, are you going to go for a hospital? No, no. So if you have like poor health, you are going to go to hospital and get checked out. So if you have like moderate, for example, if there are two persons like in a hospital, somewhere in between, and one person has very poor health. So the if a doctor has to choose out of two of them, most of the time they will treat the particular person which has lesser health, poor health, and then only they will move on to the person who has like average health. Are you clear, Ayomi? So
Yes.
basically we had to select loan controlling. But in here, some loan controlling might not be the answer also. Any other person can justify this one. Selection of contract preparation. So I'm not telling that we have to select loans controlling, but based on the theory, we have to select loan controlling as Tarik mentioned. Is there any other reason for selecting control like contract preparation? Menoli? Can you explain why you have selected contract preparation? Menoli?
It has high importance and high health, and also high feasibility.
Okay, so everyone is telling the same answer. Imports and health is same for loan control and contract preparation. So no, sorry, imports and health, no, not imports and health. Imports and feasibility is same, but the health is different. Okay, so I will explain what is this scenario. So to explain that particular scenario, I'm not going to tell that both contract preparation might be also correct, but loan controlling might be also, but based on theory, loan controlling is the particular thing that we have to select. So based on theory, okay. So based on theory means considering importance, health, and feasibility. We have to select loan controlling here. Okay, so when you are going for the actual practical scenario, it might change based on your BPM activities within the organization. To answer this one, we will do a small activity and then we'll come back to this one and I will explain very briefly. Okay, so you don't need to take 20 minutes. What I'm going to do is you have to read the particular question carefully should all processes that are unhealthy, of strategic importance, and feasible to manage be subjected to BPM? So it means in this quadrant, we have identified many things. Both loan controlling, contract preparation, loan market evaluation, handling payments, loan decisions are all, apart from loan decision, others are medium feasibility, has high feasibility, and it has high strategic importance and poor health. So should we select all these particular processes? So you have to answer this one and you have to justify. Because as we are running out of time, I'm not going to group you all into this activity. So just have some time to read this one now. Just have understanding, read this question, and I will ask one by one about what's your opinion about this one. Okay, so what would be the answer? Should we select all the particular processes that are unhealthy, strategic importance, or feasible to manage, or else we have to select like few of those things? What would be the answer? Can you just send me a message to the chat box? If you think all, just type all. If you think selected ones, type selected. Can you send me a message through chat box? So if you think we have to select all the particular processes that are unhealthy in strategic importance and feasible, type all. If you think we have to select one or two processes to be improved at a time, type selected and send it through the chat box. Ishara, are you clear about the question and how to answer? Ishara? Shadir, are you clear? Kashini, are you clear? Chandi, are you clear about the question, Chandi? Chamodi, are you clear, Chamodi? Can somebody just mention whether you are clear or not? Sanjana, are you clear? Sanjana, can you hear me? Just mention whether you can hear me or not.
Yes, sir. Can hear. Can you explain again?
Okay, so in this one, so the question is should all processes that are unhealthy? So basically, in this process selection criteria, we identified three possible things. One is strategic importance, health, and the other one is feasibility. So basically, to select a particular process, it should be in strategic importance for process improvement, and the particular process should be unhealthy. Unhealthy means the health of the particular process. It's in dire need of help. So that is in another way we can explain unhealthy. And feasible, whether whether we are able to improve the particular process. So if we identified like 10 processes that are both unhealthy, strategic importance, and feasible to manage, should we do BPM activities to all those 10 processes, or should we select one or two out of them? So that's the question that I'm asking here. So for this one, I will let you all know the answer because nobody answered for this one. So basically, when you are considering processes for selection, we should not select, not too many processes should be selected for improvement for two reasons. So basically, we should not select all the 10 processes as I explained earlier. We should not select all the 10 processes. We should select one or few. So when you are selecting also, so as I mentioned earlier, BPM is an investment. So organizations should have necessary resources to do BPM activities. So most of the time, although organization does not have many, like large organization might have can invest in projects, multiple projects at the same time, but most of the organizations cannot improve at the same time. Processes cannot be improved at the same time. Okay, so because of that, we have limited financial resources of improvement teams are typically limited. And another one is having too many improvement projects at the same time. We have a coordination issue. The complexity of coordination is high. Because of these two reasons, we should not select many projects to be done at the same time. So if the organization has necessary means if they have like resources, if they can handle it, then it's fine. You can go for like 10 or 20 projects at the same time if they have the required resources. If they don't have the required resources and they are within a limited budget, and likewise if the particular organization is not doing well with regard to profits and other things, they can identify one or few processes to be improved at a time. Okay, so another factor is, for example, if an organization is starting this BPM journey only now itself, they don't have a track record, so they don't have a history of like successful projects. Under such situations, we should not go for the most important, which has the highest strategic importance, which is like lowest, which has a lesser health. We should not select a particular project like that. So as Tarun mentioned, based on the theory, if you have a prior BPM experience and other things, the thing that we have to select here is loan controlling. As per Tarindu and as only per Tarindu, only have mentioned Tarindu, based on theory. If you have based on theory as well as if you have a BPM track record. So within the organization, we have been doing BPM activities for a couple of years and we have been successful and everybody believes in BPM activities, then you should go for loan controlling. For example, consider an organization is starting their first initiative of BPM. So if you're going for the first activity, you should not select loan controlling here. If this is the first instance that the organization is doing BPM activities, you should not select loan controlling because it has a higher strategic importance and its health is very poor. And the people who are within the BPM activities might be less experienced. So under such situations, they have to select an activity first that they can improve and show to others. So people will believe in BPM activities. So they can select a particular activity like loan market evaluation or loan application or loan planning, handling payments. Likewise, they can select something like that rather than selecting for the first initiative. Okay, I'm not telling after they have a good BPM track record, they have to select a particular process from this quadrant. So if they don't have if they do not have experience, or if it is the first initiative, they have to select a particular process that they can improve very easily, so that they can get a good understanding about BPM, or people will trust the BPM activities within the organization. Okay, so that's why I say we suggest not to tackle first the process that is more strategically important and the least healthy, because you will have a high chance of failure. So basically, if you select the more strategic particular process as well as the least healthy project as your first project, you will have a high chance of failure because people will not support the BPM initiatives. There might be very unthinkable things happening because you don't have much experience. People does not believe in BPM activities within the organization. So to have a trust and to build up a trust within the organization and to get experience, we have to identify. We should start with small number of projects and learn from these. So after learning from small particular project, BPM projects, you can go for this particular project that is more strategically important and the least healthy. Because BPM initiatives should try to create success stories in the beginning. So in the beginning of BPM journey, you should like create success stories. So then only you can move on to very strategic important processes, very unhealthy processes that can be improved and that can have a higher impact towards the organizational like achievement of organizational goals. Okay, so is everyone clear about that factor? Prabodha, are you clear, Prabodha?
Yes, sir.
What about Shashika? Are you clear, Shashika?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so moving on. So those are the things that we have to cover. So as a summary, what did we learn at the first? Bhagya, what did we learn at the inception of the lesson? Ahimsa, what did we learn at the start of our lesson? Can you summarize the things that we discussed?
What is business process identification and why that is important?
Yes, initially we discussed what is business process identification and why business process identification is important for an organization. So then what did we discuss, Nilochani? Tarush, can you just mention what is the thing that we discussed after business process identification? So basically, we discussed about business process selection. Before business process selection, we defined the process checklist. So through a process checklist, what did we do is we identified the criteria to identify a particular thing as a process for improvement. And then we have selection. So under process selection, after identifying all the processes, the map of processes of the organization, we have a criteria to identify which processes that we should focus on for selection for BPM initiatives and process performance measures. So basically, we use process performance measures to identify its baselines. Through using the baselines, we have defined objectives and targets for the BPM initiatives. So basically, we use process portfolio under process selection to identify which processes that we should select within an organization. So as a summary, these are the things that we learned today. For the discussion activity, there are 2 questions. I think you have the discussion class in the evening today. So the first question you have to do, and second question is regarding a process portfolio. So try out this question in the discussion class, and the answers will be discussed in the discussion class as well. So that's it for today. So if you have any questions with regard to today's lesson, you can ask now. If not, you can leave the meeting by sending me a small feedback. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice day.